Imagine waking up one day and the bees are gone. No buzzing, no hives, no honey. And within 3 years, most of the food on your plate disappears with them. That's not a horror movie plot. That's what scientists have been warning about for decades. Because when an animal disappears, it doesn't just leave an empty space in a nature documentary. It pulls a thread, and the entire fabric of life starts to unravel. Today, we're talking about animals that are already gone. Animals that once held ecosystems together, fed entire food chains, shaped landscapes, and kept the planet balanced. Animals we lost and are still paying the price for losing. This is not just a list of dead creatures. This is a story about consequences. Let's start with the most famous extinct animal in history, the one that became a symbol of stupidity. But here's what nobody tells you about the dodo. This bird wasn't stupid, it was fearless. It had evolved on the island of Mauritius with no natural predators, so it had no reason to run from anything. When Dutch sailors arrived in the 1600s, the dodo walked right up to them. That fearlessness got it killed within 80 years of first contact. But the real consequence of the dodo's extinction wasn't felt immediately. It was felt in the trees. The dodo was one of the only animals that could eat the large hard fruit of the tambalacoke tree, also called the dodo tree, and pass the seeds through its digestive system, softening them enough to germinate. When the dodo vanished, the tree stopped reproducing. Scientists discovered tambalacoke trees on Mauritius, all over 300 years old, with no young trees growing beneath them. An entire species of tree nearly followed the dodo into extinction because the one animal that carried its seeds was gone. One bird, one tree, a whole ecosystem quietly breaking. The woolly mammoth roamed the frozen grasslands of the Arctic for hundreds of thousands of years, and it was an ecosystem engineer on a massive scale. Mammoths trampled shrubs and trees, keeping vast stretches of land as open grassland. Their footprints created depressions that collected water, forming small ponds that other animals depended on. Their dung fertilized the soil. Their grazing patterns maintained what scientists call the mammoth steppe, one of the most productive grassland ecosystems in Earth's history. When the mammoths disappeared, through a combination of climate change and human hunting, the grasslands slowly gave way to moss and shrubland. That transition is still affecting us today. The permafrost beneath those Arctic lands, once stabilized by deep-rooted grassland plants, is now thawing. And as it thaws, it releases massive amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. The extinction of the woolly mammoth is still contributing to climate change. Thousands of years later. In the 1800s, the passenger pigeon was the most numerous bird on Earth. Flocks so large, they darkened the sky for days as they passed overhead. Estimates suggest there were between 3 and 5 billion of them. By 1914, the last one, a female named Martha, died in a Cincinnati zoo. In less than 50 years, humans hunted an entire species of 5 billion birds into extinction. The passenger pigeon played a critical role in the eastern American forests. Their massive flocks broke branches as they landed, creating gaps in the forest canopy that allowed sunlight to reach the forest floor, encouraging new plant growth. Their droppings, deposited in enormous quantities, fertilized the soil in ways that supported entire communities of insects, plants, and other birds. When they vanished, the forest structure changed. Species that depended on those gaps and that fertilization quietly declined. An invisible support system had been removed, and the forest has never been quite the same. The Pyrenean ibex was a wild mountain goat that lived in the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain. On January 6, 2000, the last known individual, a female, was found dead, crushed by a fallen tree. Just like that. Gone. The ibex had been a key grazer in high-altitude mountain ecosystems, controlling vegetation growth on steep slopes. Without them, certain plants began to overgrow, altering soil stability and increasing erosion on the mountainsides they once maintained. Their story is also a landmark in extinction science. In 2003, scientists used preserved DNA to clone a Pyrenean ibex, the first extinct animal ever to be brought back to life. The cloned kid survived for 7 minutes before dying of lung defects. 7 minutes. The species went extinct twice in 3 years. The thylacine, better known as the Tasmanian tiger, was the largest carnivorous marsupial of modern times. It looked like a dog with tiger stripes and a stiff tail, and it was the apex predator of Tasmania. Farmers blamed it for killing livestock. The government paid bounties for every thylacine killed. By 1936, the last known individual died in a Hobart zoo, reportedly from neglect, left outside on a cold night. As the apex predator, the thylacine kept populations of mid-sized animals in check. Without it, those populations grew unchecked, overgrazing vegetation, outcompeting smaller species, and disrupting the balance of Tasmania's ecosystems in ways that researchers are still documenting today. When you remove the animal at the top of a food chain, everything below it shifts. The great auk was a large, flightless seabird that lived across the North Atlantic, an exceptional swimmer, diving deep to catch fish, nesting in enormous colonies on rocky islands, hunted for its feathers, fat, and meat. The last 2 known great auks were strangled by collectors on a small island off Iceland in 1844. Their egg was smashed in the process. The great auk had been a critical part of the North Atlantic marine food web, consuming large quantities of fish, and in turn feeding polar bears, orcas, and sharks. Its disappearance created a gap in the marine ecosystem that shifted fish population balances in ways that affected commercial fishing for generations. The golden toad was a brilliantly colored species found only in a tiny cloud forest reserve in Costa Rica. Males were a vivid, almost unreal shade of orange. Females were darker, spotted with red and yellow. In 1987, over 1,500 golden toads were observed. By 1989, not a single one could be found. It became one of the first species to be directly linked to climate change-driven extinction. Shifting rainfall patterns disrupted the specific microclimate it needed to breed. Amphibians like the golden toad are biological indicators. Their presence signals a healthy ecosystem. Their absence signals collapse. When the golden toad vanished, it was the canary in the coal mine for an entire cloud forest under stress. Here's what all of these animals have in common. None of them were just animals. They were architects, farmers, engineers, indicators, regulators. Each one held a role in a system so interconnected that removing even one piece sent ripples outward into forests, oceans, soils, skies, and eventually into our own lives. The dodo took a tree down with it. The mammoth is still warming the planet from extinction. The passenger pigeon reshaped American forests. The thylacine unbalanced an island. The great auk disrupted an ocean. The golden toad warned us, and we weren't listening. We live on a planet that took 4 billion years to assemble. Every species in it is a working part, and every extinction is not an ending. It's a consequence that hasn't fully arrived yet. So, the next time you hear about an endangered animal and think, what does it really matter? Remember the dodo tree, 300 years old. No seedlings, waiting for a bird. That is never coming back. If this made you think differently about the natural world, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.